Hey, what's up, guys? It's Halsey Schroeder with the Helicopter Podcast, and big shout out to our friends at MHM Publishing for creating the vertical HeliCASTS platform and making this show possible. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, including Robinson Helicopters. In fact, our guest today, Dylan Tent, actually has a Robinson helicopter, so that's fitting. We'll talk a little bit about Robinson. There's some exciting news actually buzzing around Robinson here in the next about 8 weeks leading up to VAI. So we can probably chat about that. But Dylan, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. What's up, man?
Not much. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, super fun to have you. This is kind of a unique podcast. I mean, it's not, I would say 50-50. 50% of the time I've met and know the person I'm talking to. And then the other 50%, it's like completely blind. And so to our guests out there, Dylan and I have known each other for all of about 2 minutes. I don't plan any questions. And this is what I love about podcasting, actually. It's just meant to be a casual conversation about helicopters. And my wife, I think, kind of spurred me on to this idea, Dylan. Like, when we lived in Vegas, I was flying full time for a company called Maverick. And so it was like 70 pilots at that time. And you can imagine every time we got together, even though we had been flying all day long, 5 days a week, sometimes 6, doing 3 tours a day, which was like an all-day thing in a horrible Mojave Desert heat, we would still get together, drink beer, and we would talk about one thing, and that was helicopters. And that always stuck with me. I think it's like such a cool thing that you and I might not have anything in common. I think we actually do, looking at your Instagram today. But it's just a neat kind of commonality of just helicopter pilots. So tell me if I'm batting 100 here. You live in Michigan.
Correct.
New father?
Yep.
Congratulations. My wife and I just went to our 20-week ultrasound today, actually. So we're expecting a little girl, so that's cool. We have that in common.
Congrats.
You're a real estate agent for Sotheby's, over $250 million in real estate sold. Is that all in the Michigan area?
Yeah, I only am licensed in Michigan, but I've referred stuff to other states like Florida and other areas.
And have a decent following actually on Instagram too under the Heli Realtor. So where did that all come about? This idea of kind of becoming, mixing your job with your passion in helicopters?
Well, it started, I was going to go be a chiropractor like my dad. My dad's a very successful chiropractor. And I was in the science classes and I watched the Red Bull snowboarding movie, The Art of Flight.
Oh my gosh.
About 3.5 minutes into that movie, an A-star that's all Red Bulled out lands on the top of a mountain on one skid, drops off some guys, and then it just almost goes inverted straight down. And I typed helicopter pilot job, and I asked my parents, I'm like, hey, helicopter school costs as much as college. Can I just go do that? And they said yes. So I only had maybe a month left to get my associate's degree in college, and I stopped going to class and found a local flight school, got my private commercial instrument and flight instructor rating. And I went to LA for my instrument. LA helicopters are no longer there, but I was offered a job, and it was to be a flight instructor to people from China that barely spoke English. And my instructor, his first student was like a primary student as a new instructor. They rolled the R-22. Neither of them were hurt, but it was like no pay, right? And I was like, man, that kind of sucks. Like, you're going to go risk your life for like what I would not consider worth it. So I'm in California. I am flying over Malibu, and I was like, man, I bet I could take a picture of that house, sell them door to door, and make more than I can make in a day than I can in a week being a flight instructor. So that's kind of how I got into it.
That's awesome. I want to talk more about that, but I have to caveat real fast. The art of flight, this is so funny. So everyone always talks about the art of flight and how awesome it is and how incredible it is. And I've always just pretended of like, yeah, it's awesome. But I had actually never seen it. And so we're with a client. We were flying a helicopter back from Toronto to Reno that we helped a client buy a couple weeks ago. We got back to the client's house in Reno, and one of my sales guys, Ian, is like, "Hey, we should show Joe, our client, the art of flight." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I've never even seen it." So I literally just watched it for the first time like 2 weeks ago. Totally epic movie. It's like, snowboard meets helicopter porn situation. A funny story. I do know like Airbus condemned the movie. Essentially, they ended up finding out the serial numbers of the helicopters that participated in that documentary, and like grounded them for some of the flying, which may be a little bit of an overreaction, but they were concerned about just how hard they were pushing. And then that crazy with the ice buildup on that one. I mean, those guys have balls of steel. But that's funny. So, did you end up actually starting a business that you were going over houses and taking photos and then selling door to door?
Yeah, so I originally the goal was to be a heli ski pilot, but I started selling door to door, and there was a guy in Michigan at my flight school that owned a 44, and Michigan is a motor city, and we have a lot of the auto test tracks here. And he bought a 44 just so he could spy on the GM proving grounds, the Ford proving grounds, Honda, and he would fly over them. So it might have been 2013 or 14, before anybody knew that there was going to be a mid-engine Corvette, we actually got a picture of the mid-engine Corvette, which is, based on the Ferrari 458, and, broke the news to the world of it. It was in camouflage. And then also took a picture of the ZL1 Camaro, and I was flying while he was taking pictures. And then when we were done with that flight, I would just pay for the gas, and I'd go take pictures of all the luxury homes and try to sell them. And it was hard. Like, I didn't sell very many pictures, but my first 3 real estate clients came from that, and they were all $1 million houses, and I didn't know what I was doing, but people thought I did, and I got to work on a lot of really cool, unique, large homes starting out at like 23.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's kind of funny how that all works. There was a company, I'm blanking on the name, but essentially this company leased 2 R22s. One would start on the East Coast, one would start on the West Coast, and they would meet in the middle. And all their job is they would fly over houses, take pictures, and then they would, I think, send mailers out of like, "Hey, here's your house, pay this." And that was like their whole job. I had a couple buddies actually that flew for that company. So it's interesting to hear that you did that as well. So you take some pictures of these luxury homes that kind of get you in the door for real estate. And that was at 23. How old are you now?
33.
Okay, so we're about 10 years into your real estate career by now.
Yeah, this is my 10th year right now, and yeah, it was just kind of funny how it worked out. Another thing that I did when I was getting my commercial license, I actually would go do boat photography, and I think that's the most fun flying I've ever done, because it's Michigan, we have the Great Lakes. Everybody has boats, and there's a thing called jobbing nooner. It's where everybody leaves their jobs at noon and go and take their boats to this island. And it's kind of like a little degenerate, but we would take pictures of left, front, right, and then we would look up their MC number, mail them a sample. Same thing. Boat Pics does that a ton.
Boat Pics,
as you know, but I was just with a different guy out of Michigan, and it was fun because it was like video game flying. And you're low, you're banking hard, you're using all the power. The R22 doesn't have a lot of power to begin with, and I really enjoyed that. But I didn't make any money off that. I just did the flying, but it was a good time.
Super cool. Yeah, speaking of boats, I was looking at your Instagram. You're a pretty decent wakeboarder.
Yeah.
Saw you throwing a tantrum or a back roll or something?
Well, the other thing that I grew up doing a lot of action sports, and any house that we could do a stunt, I would, or I'd land at it. And so I've jumped a motorcycle over a house. I've jumped one off somebody's pool deck, incorporated snowboarding, wakeboarding, hydrofoil surfing, stand-up jet skiing, anything that would make somebody watch a video longer. And that was when I started. The real estate videos were really basic. It was just like maybe a drone shot over the house and, some soft music. And I would do something and I'd get, rather than 500 views on just showing the house, I'd get, 50,000 views if I did something like dressed my dog in a business suit and, did something funny or something creative. So that was kind of, I would say I very quickly was able to compete with the top realtors because I'd say, listen, I don't know what I'm doing as much, but I'll get more people to look at your house online than anybody. And that was always my pitch. It's like marketing is what I think is the most important part about this thing. Let's get people to look at your house and then maybe somebody will want to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, obviously you want a real estate agent that's experienced and kind of can run the transaction and gets it. And I'm guessing by this time you're very experienced and good at it. But you also, the marketing is the biggest point, You probably make fun of me for this, but I'm actually a big fan of $1 Million Listing.
Oh, I like it too. Read all those guys' books when I started.
And, they do, that's kind of their thing, right? I mean, they're just kind of master, marketers. And so it seems like you've, taken that and ran with it and used the helicopter. And yeah, your videos are super cool. So do you currently own that 44 then that you're flying around in?
Yeah, I was renting for a little while. And then I was going to rent some hours off of a friend of mine who has a pretty cool business as well. You guys should have him on sometime. But he needed to, he would buy timed out 44s overseas that were past their 12-year. And then shipping container them over here, do the 12-year inspection, throw new blades on them, and sell them for a profit. And I was ferrying one of those to Florida and back with him. And we just got talking about the economics of it. And I was like, man, the monthly payment isn't that much different than just, renting one of these from you. And I was like, if you come across a Raven 2, with bubble windows that's around this price point, let me know. And he's like, I actually just have one that just arrived to Sevier County Choppers. I don't know if you know those guys, but Jimmy. And so on our way back from Florida, we stopped at TJ Helicopters, and they're like, hey, this is the helicopter. You should buy it. We just leased it for 3 months. But when it's back, you can have it. And I was like, well, that's great. I got to get my financing in order. So, got my financing, and then I bought one, and, now I use it to take clients to look at houses, to do tours. And then, a lot of times it's like golf ball drops and charity and, flying to golf courses with people.
Yeah, it's a good content creator. People love watching helicopters. It's a totally neat experience. And from a real estate perspective, like if, I'm a client looking at houses, being able to see it from the air like that would be super fun. Very familiar with TJ, of course, Jimmy Garst, and I'm guessing you're talking about Sergio. That sounds very Sergio-esque on how you're going there. That's actually my business as well. I've been selling and buying aircraft for a long time, not like Sergio does, but yeah, I know those guys really well. So ownership, this is interesting. A lot of people actually message me, and they're always asking about, hey, this idea of owning versus leasing, or should I own the helicopter? And when I look at leasing, other than the capital investment up front, it's more expensive, right? You're paying all the same expenses. Typically it's a dry lease. So, right, you're covering insurance, fuel, hangar, pilot if you have to hire one, insurance, maintenance, which is scheduled, unscheduled. And then you're paying an hourly, lease payment on top of that. And right, there's an advantage if you can't get the traditional financing for it, or if you don't have the cash just to buy it in full. So I understand that part of it, but just financing, to me, it seems like a better option. Are you able to talk a little bit about your experience, the financing experience of the helicopter, and just what it's been like for helicopter ownership? Because we do get asked that a lot.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Yeah, so when I did it, I don't even remember. It was a Robinson-specific company for loans. I mean, it was several years ago, but I looked them up online. It was like a 5% interest rate. But it was fairly easy to apply. I think I put 10% down, and I bought it at a time when I think the thing's almost worth just a little less than what I paid for it several years later, which is nice. But the unscheduled maintenance is where that I had one bad bill where a tappet valve in my engine it's like cracked.
Yeah.
And they found it at my 300 hour.
Yeah.
And it didn't cause any damage. It didn't fail, but it was cracked. And so they had to split the cases, and it took a long time. And it was almost would have cost less to buy a remanufactured engine and put it in there. I probably should have done that. But when we opened it up, it's like, oh, this went from a $10,000 job, and it climbed pretty quickly. And then it was like, for $10,000 more, you could get a used engine, but whatever, live and learn. So overall, like, the operating costs have not been that bad. I probably would have leased the helicopter initially, but most people want a 40-hour minimum, and I don't fly 40 hours a month. I'll never fly 40 hours a month. 20 would be a good month for me in the summer, and 5 to 10 in the winter, or even less sometimes. So yeah, it was just the economics didn't really work for trying to come up with paying that hourly minimum.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot actually, is the hourly minimum kind of scares people off, anywhere from 20 to 40 hours, kind of depending on who you talk to. And again, there's not really a benefit, right? Even if that unscheduled maintenance event came up with the tappet, maybe you could say, oh, actually, this might have been when you owned it. And I mean, it gets complicated very quickly. But helicopter ownership is certainly not for the faint of heart. I try to explain that to people the best I can. So you definitely have to be able to afford operating a helicopter.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, one thing that I don't think my clients always understand. I try to educate them the best I can, where it's like, okay, well, theoretically, if you save or put aside, $250 an hour for a 44 or whatever it is now, that should cover like a maintenance reserve for a 100-hour annual type situation. And I would say, maybe out of 5 annuals, 4 of them will be pretty good, and you'll be able to kind of escape and be within reason, right? Like, I think annual is probably around 4,000 now, and then maybe you pay a couple thousand more, but every once in a while you get a $45,000 bill.
Yeah.
And if you can't stroke that check, then, your helicopter is not flying. So it's certainly not for the faint of heart. But what are some of the other surprises of helicopter ownership, things that you really enjoy about it? And other than the unscheduled maintenance, is there other things that are maybe not great?
Well, it's been a great networking tool. Car events. I mean, it's like, if you say you're a helicopter pilot, everybody wants to talk, and they all want to ask kind of the same questions, which is fine. You know them, I know them. But how long does it take to become a pilot? How much does it cost? Whatever. But that's all fun. But growing up around action sports and things like that, I think it was a good fit for me to go into this. I raced motorcycles competitively for a lot of years before I got into it. So I think the thrill that most people might get from it, it's like a little bit more relaxing to me than maybe some of the other things I've done. I think that having that respect for dangerous machines my whole life, kind of helps you out with being a pilot, because you meet people that are like, I want to get my helicopter license, and them, and you're like, it's not for you.
Yeah.
You should maybe not even be driving, but it's just kind of funny.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's certainly a personality. I was never a motorsport guy, so I don't like going fast in cars. I've never really ridden a motorcycle, I don't think. But I grew up wakeboarding. I grew up skiing. I'm still a very active skier to this day. And I pushed the limits. I did. Now I'm old and scared that I can't send an email for 8 weeks if I break my arm or something. So I'm a little more conservative, especially on the skis. But in a helicopter, I'm very conservative, and I've always taken kind of this conservative approach. With you having like an action motorsport background, something like motocross, which from my outside perspective can look dangerous, but obviously if you're trained, you're taking calculated risks. I mean, it's no more dangerous than a lot of things. But was there anything in your personality, especially being on the younger side at 23 years old, that you had to kind of tone back a little bit to be a little more conservative in the cockpit, or did you always take that approach?
I in motorcycle racing, I was always pretty safe. So, I've in, decades of riding, I've broken one bone. It was my femur, which is the biggest bone and most painful one to break in your body. And it was a freak accident.
It's not a good one.
But, my ACLs are intact. My shoulders are intact, can't say that for a lot of my friends that are into it. So I'd rather ride at 80% and stay safe than push it. I think every pilot's had a moment where they've maybe flown into weather they shouldn't have, or done something that's like questionable. Sometimes we're landing at houses that are tight landing zones, on lakes, and there's beach balls in people's backyards that could bluff up and hit your tail rotor. So, I'm always very mindful of that stuff, but, we try to keep the risk to a minimum for sure.
Yeah, it's important. Look, I think you can be as conservative as possible, but things happen, right? Weather changes fast, unexpected things like, you're landing on an off airport and a tarp flies up or a ball flies up. With you flying and landing at houses a lot, that's probably something that you have to be pretty considerate about. What about this idea? We love helicopters. Obviously, you love helicopters. One thing that I know, though, is not everyone loves helicopters, especially when you're landing helicopters around houses and things like that. In fact, our client that we were with recently in Reno, we landed at his house and some neighbors got uppity about it. Has there been a line that you've had to toe a little bit or balance out to fly neighborly and not kind of upset the status quo?
Well, there's only been one person that really got annoyed that I was landing at this house. It was out in the country, 10-acre lot, plenty of room to land. I didn't fly over the neighbor's house. And it wasn't the neighbor. It was like her brother, who was kind of like an adult, almost like a stepbrother's character, like never left home, kind of a loser, comes out and he's like, "What are you doing? Why are you?" I'm like, "I'm allowed to do this." And he's like, you're ruining the day. It's so peaceful. And I'm like, well, I was like, I'm just going to land here. We're doing this video and then we're going to take off. And so he goes and puts his lawn chair right on the property line and just stares at me with his arms crossed. And, I'm like, what is this guy's deal? And so every time I had a showing on that house, for sure, I flew there no matter what, unless the weather was bad. Just to mess with the guy. Because the person that owned the house didn't care. It was,
it was this guy.
Yeah. So that's pretty much been like, most people think it's cool.
Yeah.
The only other time is whenever I land at lakes, I try to shut down real quick and then when I take off, I try to fire up and go because everybody wants to pull their boat over and pull right where you're going to take off. And there was one during COVID, they were like, oh, like Michigan was like super locked down and I didn't care about that at all. I just, lived my life the whole time. But I flew to a house and, it was like an approach where you had to take off backwards. I didn't have enough width to turn around. So I'm taking off backwards up and over these boats kind of. And, it's like, if it was a Saturday, maybe I wouldn't have flown in there. But during the week, you're usually pretty fine on the lake houses. So maybe that was the only other one where I was like, this is a tight spot.
Yeah. That's tough, right? People are going to always want to come be looky-loos, especially when a helicopter is landing at a house. I landed on a lake in an R-22 back in flight school days. And same situation within 3 minutes. It's like, everyone and their mother had their boat right there. And actually, this was a really crappy situation. I was with the instructor at the time. I was working on my commercial, I think. And I grew up in a town outside of Portland, Oregon. And there's a little lake there. And there's a house it's a pretty cool house, actually. I think it recently sold for 19 or $20 million.
Yeah.
It's a 7-acre house island on this small lake that I grew up on. And it was built by the same guy that built the Timberline Lodge, which was it's a historic lodge on Mount Hood. It's featured in The Shining. You've been there?
Yeah, I did the Wendell snowboard camp. And
Wendell's, yeah. So I had a mountain cabin in government camp right next to Wendell's. So yeah, if you're familiar. So this house was incredible. And I was young at the time. I think I was 19 years old and or maybe even younger, actually. And I had been working on that house. I would, do miscellaneous projects for the owner. The guy had started a shoe company, and then he held a patent still on a Reebok shoe. And he was just cashing 12 cents at a time for each shoe, type of situation. So he was a cool dude, loved helicopters. He's like, "Oh, come land." And so we did. And yeah, sure enough, all these boats congregate. Yeah, we shut down. We're talking to the owner at the time. His name was Jerry, hanging out, fire up. We take off, and there's video of it. And we're flying. We'd take off over these boats, not backwards. So we had a nice, we could just go straight, do a pedal turn on the dock there, and just went right over. But we flew over boats. And I went to a very conservative flight school, very large flight school. So, my experience at a large flight school is like, man, you got to be by the book kind of all the time. And so my instructor, unfortunately, Bill, ended up getting fired for doing that. And so my one experience of landing, on a lake, I get my instructor fired, and I felt horrible. It was my idea, right? It was like, hey, let's go do this fun thing. And, luckily Bill, this is years and years and years ago, and Bill's completely landed on his feet and still a good friend of mine. But that was kind of my one landing on the lake experience. But, pretty cool. And look, helicopters, you always have to kind of dance the line of doing helicopter things, right? I mean, every day helicopters are working, and they're working, say, in the HV diagram, and they have to because they're doing power lines, or they're doing this or doing that. When you're taking a helicopter off and you're off airport, you may fly over some stuff. You may fly over house, cars, boats. It's just part of being a helicopter pilot, and you just have to kind of do that risk versus reward and just, I guess, go with it. So it's interesting. I didn't realize that you kind of planned out a professional career path in helicopters. I find it interesting that you did like 2 years of school and then decided, I'm going to go to helicopters. What did your parents think of that?
They were totally fine with it. They were completely supportive. So I was very, very blessed.
That's lucky. Yeah, it's not always the case that helicopters are weird. I think planes are maybe a little bit easier to sell for parents sometimes.
Yeah.
Have a career path in the airlines. Everyone's been in an airliner. Most people are scared of helicopters. I was very lucky too. I had very supportive parents, and they had been flying me or driving me to flight lessons, since high school, essentially, on airplanes, and then getting into helicopters. But at that time, you were getting into helicopters for a career. You saw the art of flight, so you want to go and do mountain flying and do heli skiing and things like that. And then your trajectory takes you kind of on this real estate path. If you could go back to a moment where that fork happened, would have you keep your current trajectory, or do you wish that you would have gone and done some of the heli skiing and things like that?
Current, for sure. The funny thing is at the same time that I made that decision, one of my friends who's a stuntman in Hollywood, I was living out in California with him and some other buddies. And he's been to Universal Studios in California and seen the Waterworld show.
I have not personally, but I know what you're talking about. And the plane comes over and lands in the water. Yeah.
So he's the main character for that. And they needed a jet ski rider or a water skier to do a jump. And when I was looking at what they'd made versus the flight instructor job, I was either going to go sell pictures, I was going to go join the stunt show, or I was going to go do that. Now, my buddy, he's very, very established in the stunt industry now. At that point, he really wasn't. But I thought about, joining that with him and kind of doing that. Cause growing up, I always wanted to be a stuntman too. I thought that'd be the coolest job. And now I get to live through him on that.
That would be cool.
He's in Lioness right now, the Bourne movies, G.I. Joe. He's doubling Owen Wilson right now.
Nice.
And, just a motocross guy that, was also a diver and a jet skier. And he has a very fun life. But, I making money was really important to me too. And there was more opportunity in real estate. I think there's obviously a lot of opportunity in helicopters too, but more on the ownership and operations side. I look at Sergio and he's doing very well. And when he started his company, we talked about doing it together. And I was like, I don't want to take away from my real estate. And looking at how well it's gone, I'm like, oh man, that would have been a good decision to do. But, it's like I'm doing great with real estate as well. So, and also, if Robinson decides your blades are expired and you own 15 of them, it's a lot different than owning one of them. And, so obviously the risk, the more you fly, the more dangerous it is too. So.
Yeah. I mean, I would never be an operator, and you're right. Sergio is killing. It's My Flight, right? That's his company. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, he started that and his great marketing, and I know they're just killing it. And so I'm happy that he's killing it. Not the story for a lot of, Robinson operators specifically.
Yeah.
They're kind of scraping by, and you're just one bad maintenance event from having a really bad day or an inspection where not just Robinson saying your blades are scrap, but oh no, you got a little corrosion on the tip, and boom, now you're out, $68K for new blades. So it's a hard business. In fact, I feel pretty lucky because I get to be involved in aviation still on the business side and have my own business. And I, similar to a real estate agent, fairly low overhead compared to, say, running an operation. So kudos to anyone that wants to run an operation. I just can't personally do it. But that's neat. I think it's cool that you're still engaged in helicopters, right? For me, I was a full-time professional pilot up until about 5 years ago. And I was, I thought that was my path. Just, go to flight school, didn't go to college, didn't really have any business background or anything like that. So I was like, okay, I'll just be a pilot. But like you, just accepted it a little bit later in life, is I didn't appreciate the pay versus risk.
Yeah.
At that time I was about to get married. I figured I would be having a kid. I started to kind of look at life a little bit differently. Like, man, like how much is my life worth? Is it worth, $65,000 to go and fly a single engine helicopter and to dark holes, in the middle of the night?
More money you make, it's all dependent on how much risk you take.
Yeah. And I just didn't feel equity. Like it didn't seem equitable, right? I feel like landing a single engine helicopter in the middle of nowhere at 3:30 in the morning after being woken up and starting a helicopter within 7 minutes to get there. It's like it just didn't compute.
Yeah.
And I liked the mission. I had a good time. I had great crews flying air medical. The air medical companies have gotten better-ish on pay, but it's still kind of crappy.
Yeah.
Ultimately for like what you do. And so for me, it was like, man, it's not worth it. And until this industry decides that they want to improve pilot pay, I think it's going to continually be people going to the airlines or people like myself or you getting out completely, right? I know so many of my helicopter buddies that I went to flight school with, big school, so lots of students, lots of friends, and they're not even close to touching helicopters anymore. They're doing real estate, they're doing construction, they're driving trucks, they're not even involved. And I think a big part of it is the pay thing. And so, hopefully as an industry, we can get better. We did a show, 6 months ago that got a lot of buzz within the industry about us, trying to push pilot pay and challenging operators to do a little bit better. So I definitely see that side of it. Real estate, obviously you're going door to door. Is that literally how it kind of started? Like, hey, I'm not interested in buying a picture, but I need to sell my house. So do you want to do that?
Verticon. Experience the ultimate thrill at Verticon, the show that features more helicopters than any. Cutting-edge technology, hundreds of companies, and international industry leaders come to the world's largest vertical aviation show. Register today at verticon.org.
Yeah, a friend of mine that I sold a picture to, his house was for sale. And I was like, oh, this would be great for marketing. He's like, hey, if you get your real estate license, you can sell the house. I don't like who I'm working with. And I just typed in, looked at it and I'm like, oh, it's $1 million house. You sell that, you get 3% of it, you make 30 grand, like sign me up. So I went to Sotheby's, which is like the #1 luxury real estate company in the world. I didn't have any idea what it was at the time. My dad tied my tie when I went to my interview, and they didn't hire new agents at that time at my company. And I go in there and I was like, hey, I want to use like fun videos, stunts, and helicopters to sell luxury houses. And they were like, yeah, sure, kid, we'll give you a shot. Kind of like maybe brush me off a little bit. And, by my second year, I was in the top 5 in the company. And, last year I was number 2 and I've been in the top 3 in like the last 5 years. And a lot of these people they've been doing it for a long time and they have the huge marketing budgets and teams. And, I kind of float around, like I work really hard, but I would say people know that I have probably the most fun out of any real estate person in Michigan with all the stuff that I do. And, I think like that, people are attracted to that. Like they can tell I'm enjoying it. And it's like the most fun thing is making these creative videos for their houses and landing there and taking off. And I just think people like it. So
does it get exhausting to try to have to figure out how to continually kind of one up yourself though? That's the one thing that I get kind of nervous about when it comes to like marketing stuff. It's like, man, it's if you're doing cool stuff all the time, at some point, it seems like the idea is, where do you get a lot of your inspiration? How do you figure all that out?
Rob Dyrdek I love watching Fantasy Factory and the way that he would launch brands and stuff like that. I kind of always felt like we were like similar. And so, and watching Red Bull stuff, there's lots of stuff that I want to do at houses. I've always wanted to skydive into a house in a business suit. I don't have my skydive license. I do have a couple jumps solo, but I never finished it. I've wanted to do that. And yeah, we always are looking for something different, something more fun, that we can one up. So
yeah, it's, it has to be consistent. That would be something that's always kind of, especially if you build the reputation for it. Like, people then expect it. Like, oh man, it's going to be a banger because, Dylan's on it.
It's another funny thing, and I'm sure you get this too. Anytime somebody does something stupid in a helicopter, I get like 50 DMs like, can we do this? And I'm like, you can do anything once, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Like the guy that dropped off the wake surfer into the wave, like, that would be a blast. I would love doing that. If you lose the engine right there, you just killed everybody on board. And all these people are like, oh, let's do it. I want to make this video. I'm like, yeah, like not with my tail number,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a serious consideration, right? Especially in the age of everyone has a phone with high quality video. It's very hard to hide, I should say. And you have to be really cognizant, not only because you don't want to hurt anyone, right? But you also don't want to get violated. The FAA is very excited to violate and make an example. Have you had, with you being, public in the helicopter space, videos of your helicopter, have you had any discussions with the FAA before?
Nope. I'm very lucky. The only funny thing that happened was one of my old flight instructors, the second I opened my tour business, he reported me to the FAA because he didn't like that I opened a competing business to him. And he's like, why would you open this without telling me? And he reported me for something. So, you have the 25-mile rule.
Yeah.
Right. So in Detroit, for where I take off from, it's like, 23 miles to Detroit, right? You go a little further on your loop and you've hit 27. So now here's the thing. Most of my flights are not paid flights that I'm doing. I'm taking the client up. So he reports me for going 27 miles on a flight that I wasn't getting paid on. And the FAA calls me and like, hey, you got to do this within 25 miles. I'm like, I get paid on like 2 out of 10 flights. I haven't even charged anybody yet for a tour flight. And, this guy is notorious for reporting people. I didn't know that when I was taking lessons from him, but after I found that out. So I was just like, wow, how lame is that? You go and, you pay somebody for some years to train with them, with the goal of you're going to be a helicopter pilot and that's your job. And then this day 2 of being open, you get reported for not even doing anything against the rules.
Yeah. People do crappy things like that, man. That's just like, that's in anything. I'm sure you get that in real estate too. I mean, you're young, start being successful. I'm sure people start, poo-pooing on you. I mean, it's just the thing. And what I found too is those guys like who you're talking about, they have they're just that personality enough to where they actually make a lot of friends within the FSDO, kind of become like the gold star. I was running a small 91 147 for our guests. If you're listening, you're confused. What we're talking about is a letter of authorization to do nonstop commercial tours in a helicopter. And there's some rules about it. The rules have actually just recently increased. You have to have an SMS program now and things like that. But essentially, you can fly a tour within 25 nautical miles, statute miles, I forget, one of them. And as long as it's A to A, you can do it. So yeah, same situation. I started a small tour company with a 44 out of Texas. I am Mr. Rules. Ever since I was a little kid, I don't like to break rules.
Yeah.
If I accidentally break a rule, I don't intentionally go and break rules. I'm just always been a real rule follower, a real Poindexter, really. And in aviation, I'm big on that. And so I was not doing any type of, bootleg 134 and a half, style charters or anything like that. And yeah, local school that I had taught at, had ended up reporting to the FSDO that I was doing bootleg charters.
Yeah.
And I got a call from, the guy's name was Bob or something. And he was pushing hard. And I was younger at the time, at 24, 25. And I luckily had the smarts to be like, hey, can I call you back? And I called a friend who's a lawyer, gave them the situation. They're like, hey, you should call this person. They're in aviation. And I kind of found out quickly, like, hey, man, if they haven't sent a letter of investigation and they're calling you directly, like that's against their protocol. And it's just like a friend helping a friend, so it sounds like it was a similar situation with you, because I'm guessing you got no letter of investigation either.
No. Yeah, they found out real quick, and I'm like, who did it? They wouldn't tell me, but I was like, found out really quickly, and then talked to them a little more, and I'm like, yeah, like I'm not even doing this, and so I've been fortunate not to have any run-ins with the FAA so far. So,
and I'm not here, of course, to bash the FAA, right? The FAA serves a vital purpose to keep our airspace and our aviators and our paying public safe. So I get that, and I respect that. In fact, like I said, I really follow the rules and everything in life, especially in aviation. But sometimes they kind of overreach, and I can say, and I try to tell my clients this that are maybe sometimes balancing a line and not doing it very well. I make it very clear, like, man, the FAA will be very happy to violate you. I think in all circumstances, it's not necessarily like your friend. So you definitely want to be careful. And especially when you're a public figure and you're posting videos and things like that, you don't want to be the guy that's dropping off the wake server that gets, 5 million views. It's not a good look. Is that the red helicopter? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I sold that one.
That's
So yeah, I'm familiar with that situation.
Yeah, Juan lost his license for like 6 months, I believe. I'm not, you hear rumors, but
yeah, I don't know. I know that individual, and I haven't heard from that guy for a while, to be honest. So I don't know if he's lying or what. But yeah, I mean, you just got to be careful. I mean, the FAA will happily make your day bad if you do something stupid and you deserve it. And sometimes it's just a vendetta. It's a small industry. I hate to hear that people do crappy things. Yeah. By and large, it's such a wonderful industry. You're talking about Sergio and guys like Jimmy. Yeah. Again, I don't know you at all, and already we have, two really common people, right? Yeah. And they're cool people and they're good people. And so it's, to me, like, that's really the industry, and those are the people. And, Jimmy and I are, competitors, right? But we've been buddies for a long, long time, and he really helped me progress into my sales.
Both of those guys are wonderful. So
yeah, in Sevier County, Jimmy's dad, James Garsh, they do good work. So it's a cool community. Similar to you, I just kind of accidentally stumbled into selling aircraft, and I didn't have to have my dad tie my tie. He wouldn't know how. First off, second off, all my business is really kind of, through email, right? I don't have too many in person, so I don't have to dress up often. But on my first deal, and it wasn't with Jimmy. This was a deal that I didn't do with Jimmy. I did a lot of early deals with him. I had to call my mom, who had been a real estate agent and now a lender for a long time. And I had to ask her, I said, Mom, what is escrow?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of this escrow? Who is this mythical escrow character? And apparently we need, my buddy Jimmy's telling me that you should call this AIC escrow. And, so I had to really learn from the ground up. And unlike real estate, there's no course, there's no certification.
Right.
It's a bit of the Wild West when it comes to selling helicopters. And so, in fact, with my business, I've tried my best to mirror it off real estate, create standard practices. It's a repeatable process, whether you're selling or buying. So it's been interesting. I see a second ago, you were drinking a drink called Fang. Yes. And I noticed on the mast of your helicopter, it also says Fang. So what's Fang?
So I invested in a company that makes non-narcotic pain medicine out of cobra venom. From motocross, a lot of my friends have, become addicted to opiates and things like that. And I've watched people die that are friends. And, when I broke my femur, I didn't want to take any of that stuff. And my boss at our Sotheby's office, who's a surgeon, was an investor in this company. And, I thought that, hey, cool, cobra venom instead of, Vicodin, great. So I got involved with the company that was doing the pain medicine. And then they were like, hey, we're going to launch a drink out of this stuff. It's for athletic recovery. And I was like, man, I've always wanted to work on a drink. I think it would be a blast. It's fun for marketing. And so, we're working on getting that launched in 70,000 stores right now.
Wow.
And, I'm a bigger investor in the publicly traded company that does the venom for the drink, but I'm going to work on getting some ownership in the drink. So I put it on my mast, and it just have been free promoting it for fun. The founder of the drink is a good guy. He's a snowboarder as well. And, they kind of came up with this over a conversation over drinks before, when they were, he was talking to another doctor that was like, hey, what's the science on using cobra venom for pain? And they're like, oh, it's a real thing. And, and he's like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could make a drink out of it? And so, there it is. The logo is designed after kind of like the Rolling Stones logo. And we have not we, but they have the patent to use cobra venom for in beverages and, in pain medicine, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's disease, and MS. And so so
obviously, I mean, you're an investor in this, so you believe in it, you're passionate. Is it legit? Like, is that legit? Like, that's crazy.
So here's the thing. I've not been in enough pain since I've used either of the products to really be like, oh my God, like, it's like, it wasn't there when I broke my femur. So I need to, and people that I know that have more chronic pain have really enjoyed it. There's very limited cobra venom in this. It's more, it's like athletic recovery. So it's not going to give you as much of a feeling as the oral spray or
Sure.
the topical gel that you'd put on maybe a wound. But, as far as I'm concerned, it works. But it's hard to say like, oh, this cured my chronic pain when I don't have any. So, but just, for motocross, if my friends get an injury, I ship them over some product, and, it's been fun. It's been one of those things that's like fun to work on. I do a lot of stuff outside of real estate, real estate title company.
That's cool.
I kind of always just messing around with little things. Real estate's 100% my focus. Helicopters, then fun, and then investing.
Entrepreneurial endeavors, which can be fun. It's all kind of in tune. Business, to me, business is like the thing that, middle-aged guys like myself can do as a sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like it's still the way that I can go and compete and, instead of, scoring baskets or touchdowns, it's money. And that's kind of like the end result. And it's exciting to be an entrepreneur. It's interesting stuff. I was actually had a wire strike accident in a Jeep Rubicon, not a helicopter. I was going down Interstate 35 in Texas in 2014. They dropped a wire, construction company dropped a wire going down the 35 and caught my front bumper, put me out of control, went head on to a barrier, rolled a few times, and ended up fracturing my back. Had to have plates put in and multiple surgeries. And so my back feels good, actually. But over time, what's happening is the discs above my injury are taking more load, essentially, because I'm fused. My whole lumbar spine is fused.
Yeah.
And so, man, I got away with it for like years. And this last like 2 years, I've been kind of chronic pain coming up into like my thoracic, into my cervical spine as well. It's causing headaches and things like that. So, man, I might have to hit you up for some cobra venom because I don't take any type of
and the cool thing about it is you can take it as a pilot. There's no buzz. It's completely FDA legal and approved and stuff like that. It's fun. We're talking about business and aviation and how they can mend. Another good friend of mine who's got a 66 and a King Air 350. He was an air traffic controller and also a pilot. And he started buying real estate during the recession in 2008 and 9. And he started with little single family houses that you'd buy for $10,000, $20,000, turned it into duplexes, quads. Now he owns maybe 750 apartments. And like on an air traffic controller salary, now owning not millions of real estate, but tens of millions of real estate. Now he has a property management company and, a King Air and an R66 and has the best schedule of anybody that I know. Like that's a lot more of like the path that I want to have rather than operating helicopters is owning them and having fun with them, sharing it with my friends, using it for marketing. And, he'll take people on his King Air down to the Bahamas that are his investors and rents a sweet house, flies them all down there. They have a blast. I met him down in the Virgin Islands when he was on one of those trips one time, and I was also there. And I look at stuff like that and, where this aviation stuff can take you. Another friend of mine just bought a 505. He has a roll-off dumpster company, like trash, and doesn't even really have a use for a helicopter. But his wife flew planes. He didn't really like planes. They did a Grand Canyon tour. I don't know if it was a Maverick, but he went home, immediately signed up for flight school, bought a 505, and now we go fly all the time together. I get to play around in his, and
Nice.
he flies mine, and that was pretty cool. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned something cool was coming.
Oh yeah,
Robinson's. What's going on?
yeah. So it's funny that you ask. I think this episode will probably come out before. I'm sorry, just shaking around. I'm just gonna hold this. Why not? So I did get approval recently. I asked Robin from Robinson if I could talk about this. I don't know anything, to be honest. So it's not like I know some secret, but they are launching 3 products, including a new aircraft design at Verticon this year. So the big Heli Expo, formerly known as HAI, which has now been rebranded to VAI, who also sponsors this podcast, and we appreciate their support and always excited for VAI. I don't know if Dylan, you plan on attending, but if you're not, you should. It's fun.
When is it?
So the event is, don't do this to me, Dylan. It's the 11th, 12th, and 13th of March is the actual show events. Fly-ins are the Friday and Saturday before, and then Sunday the 9th, Robinson is holding a launch event for 3 products. One is an aircraft design. And I don't know anything about it. I just know that it's apparently going to really be a big deal for the industry. I don't know how familiar you are, Dylan, with Robinson and the business itself, but they were sold. They have a new CEO for the first time. They have a non-Robinson last name, CEO. Yeah, David Smith came from Bell. He was actually the lead engineer or the program manager, I should say, I think, for the Bell 505. So big responsibility of building that aircraft and bringing it, and then went over to Robinson. I've had him on the podcast, I think, 4 times. So if you're listening, go ahead, check out the episodes I've done with David. But man, they're doing some crazy, awesome stuff at Robinson. And obviously you're a passionate Robbie guy. So I don't need to sell you on Robinson, but what I've been telling people is the feeling that I get from Robinson right now is like Willy Wonka.
Mm-hmm.
So for like the last 51 years, they've been doing great. They revolutionized civil helicopters with the R-22. Frank was a visionary. And he then did it again with the R-44. And then they killed it with the 66. I mean, like they've done back-to-back awesome. But it was very closed off. It was a family-run, very large business, but still family-ran. So I'm sure that added complexities.
Yeah.
And it was a very closed door type of situation. In fact, I went there and shot some content last year, right after David had taken the helm and the sale was done. And it was, I had a camera in the factory. That hadn't ever happened, or if it did, it was very sparse. And so big things, big changes. So I feel like Robinson has opened the floodgates.
Yeah.
They want everyone and anyone to learn about their product. They want to change the narrative a little bit. I'm sure you've seen there's a lot of Robinson hate. I'm sure you even get some Robinson hate, which you and I know it's a fantastic helicopter. I mean, find me a helicopter that sits 4, has the power and performance that it does at the operating cost, right? Yeah. I mean, it's completely unheard of. But apparently the R88, which is the next product being released, is going to compete with aircraft. That's probably about as much as I should say. And so, pretty excited for that. And yeah, you should totally come. In fact, I had extra tickets. So if you want to come, let me know. I'd love to have you join.
And it's very possible. I know I'd have to look at the dates. I'm going to Hawaii in March, family trip. And actually, I flew with Maverick on a tour in Maui last time I was there. That
nice.
Was fun.
Yeah, I've never, in fact, I'm going to Hawaii for the first time in like 2 weeks, a little baby moon action. We're going to go to Kauai.
Nice.
I'm funny though. My wife is like, hey, let's do the helicopter Jurassic tour thing. And I'm like, Like, I don't like getting into helicopters when I'm not the pilot. Unless I know unless I know the pilot, I just have zero interest, honestly. So my wife was like, really? I'm like, no, look, like you're pregnant. I'm not flying. I'm sure they're great, but no, I'm not going.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
It was funny. We did our baby moon in Iceland, and we did.
Oh, very cool.
It was the fire and ice tour where you land on the glacier and then you land on the volcano. That was very cool. We did an A-Star. I've never flown an A-Star. That's like, probably my dream helicopter, right?
Super cool.
And then, one of the most enjoyable flights I've ever done was at Sky Helicopters in British Columbia. You take off and you go land up on the glacier, but you fly through the mountains around there. And we went up there and then we landed back in Vancouver, which was a blast. I really enjoyed that.
That's super cool. I'm lucky, right? I can be kind of picky because I have developed so many awesome friends and so many great clients that have helicopters and go and do really fun things. And I get to be in the cockpit on the controls and flying. We were recently in Utah flying all around the Wasatch Range and thinking to myself, like, this is a bucket list for 9 out of 10 people. I mean, how lucky am I? And so I love helicopter adventuring. That's the magic of helicopters, right? You go land on a glacier, you can land on a river and go fishing. We were landing at 10,000 foot mountain peaks, in 4 feet of snow.
Yeah.
Incredible. I just want to be at the controls or be with a pilot that I'm very comfortable with. And so I just get a little weird on kind of doing the off the boat tour style thing. But Maverick, obviously great reputation. Their maintenance precedes them both at their Maui location and their Vegas and South Rim location. I mean, phenomenal companies. But so new dad, how is this? You got a little baby boy, right?
Yeah, Sterling. He's 4 months in 2 days.
Sterling, super cool name. I didn't know your Instagram when I did this, but I also did an R44 gender reveal. So I saw that we had that in common.
Yeah.
That was pretty exciting. I don't get to flex. It wasn't my helicopter. So you have that on me. But we both did a 44 gender reveal. 4 months. I need some tips here, man. What should I expect?
I got really blessed to have a very chill baby. And I think a lot of that's my wife is, she read everything and was very good at identifying his cues. So she's been able to really calm him. So everyone's like, oh, how are you sleeping? And I mean, we're breastfeeding, so you have to feed him at the beginning every 2 hours, but now he sleeps through the night. And, there's been just a few times where he's been kind of had little meltdowns, but, yeah, I don't know. A lot of people that I know now, like they talk about, how crazy it was and how neither of them could sleep. And it's not been my experience. It's been wonderful for me so far. So they say if you have a chill baby though, when they're like 1 and 2, they're nightmares. But
it could change. That's what I've heard too.
Once they're bigger and more fun, like, yeah, give me him. I'll play with him and can go wear him out.
I have a lot of guy friends that say they feel very hopeless for the first, few months because they really can't do much, right? You can't breastfeed, and you just have to kind of play a support role, and that's a lot. And
yeah,
I'm excited. I feel like, I'm 36. I feel like an old man. And so, having a kid at 36, I feel like I should be able to hopefully figure it out. But I'm definitely a little bit nervous. My wife and I are not reading any books right now.
I didn't read anything. I figured to just wing it.
That's kind of how, I think my wife has been like, hey, we should read a chapter of that book. And I'm like, yeah, or we could watch Severance. I don't know. So, I feel like, man, I don't know. I probably should learn something because I don't know the first time.
A couple things. If you're planning on breastfeeding, go and get a lactation consultant.
Okay. That's a thing?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
That will save you tons of time.
Interesting.
If they come out and they say they have a tongue tie, get that fixed really quickly. It's because they won't be able to breastfeed later on. And, I want to produce an athletic specimen that's that's breastfed and intelligent and all that stuff. So, I grew up with a chiropractor for a dad, so I've never been to a doctor or a pediatrician. I don't take any pharmaceuticals, no vaccines, no anything like that. And that's, a lot of people don't feel that way. But, if you look at my son, he's a legend already. So, and he's
That's
20
awesome.
pounds. He's 20 pounds at 4 months, which is
Wow.
No,
That's a big baby. I was like 10'4" when I was born, and I was 3 weeks early.
yeah.
So I was kind of chubby then, and then I was not chubby for a period of life, and now I'm chubby again. So it's all back full circle. Super cool. Well, Dylan, thanks so much for coming on. Speaking of motocross, there is someone that's really cool within the helicopter industry that was a supercross champion. I don't know if you know Heath Voss, or the name at least.
I know the name.
Yamaha racer. I think he won in 2007. Don't quote me on that. But he retired into helicopters. He owns a company out of Texas called Hangar 13. They do maintenance. He operates a 130 and a 407 GXP. Salt of the earth. One of my favorite people. He's probably mad that I would ever even mention his name on this. Not that he would necessarily find out, but he's a legend. He's super cool dude. So humble. And yeah, he happened to be a motocross champion. And so you should look him up, reach out to him. He would love to chat with you. He's a super cool dude.
Who's the stunt guy that does all the crazy stuff in the A-Stars? What's his name? I can't see it in the town.
Okay, well, there's a couple. You're probably talking about Fred North.
Yeah, Fred North.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I prefer to chat with guys like Kevin LaRosa. Kevin was actually on the podcast last year. Kevin is, I would call like the stunt guy for Hollywood. He did Maverick, Top Gun. He's an aerial coordinator and stunt pilot, generational. His dad was in it. And he's a guy that does it by the book, does it very safely. So he just doesn't post a lot of like videos, so he doesn't really have the clout that Fred has.
Yeah.
I don't know Fred. Fred's, looks like he does some pretty crazy things on Instagram and things like that. So
yeah,
I'll leave it there.
Yeah. No, that's my buddy. Because my buddies that are in stunts are like, they're like, this guy's crazy. They're like, hard on the, close.
Yeah. I plead the fifth. I don't know the guy. I've definitely seen his videos, and yeah, it seems like he's doing some pretty wild things.
Yeah.
But I do know Kevin LaRosa from K2. Man, he's incredible. That's a fun episode. I forget the number, somewhere low hundreds is where you can find Kevin LaRosa. But Dylan, thank you so much for coming on. Great conversation. Fun to chat with you. If you want to say what's up or check out what Dylan is doing, you can check him out on Instagram at the Heli Realtor. Not the Heli Realtor, but it's Heli Realtor.
Yep.
So drop the. And yeah, great content, man. I actually loved stalking your profile today. I think with cold call,
your handle.
I'm at Heli Halsey is kind of the handle that I'm trying to push right now. I'm at a whopping 450, maybe 500, close to 500 followers. So I'm a big deal. So yeah, Heli Halsey, you can find me. I've also that helicopter podcast, and of course my sales business is Helicopter. Again, big shout out to MHM Publishing and Vertical Magazine for making this podcast possible. Thank you to Robinson Helicopters, of course, for being a sponsor. VAI, Bell Helicopters. We talked about the 505. They're also a sponsor, so we appreciate that. Dylan, any last words, brother?
No, thanks so much for having me. It was fun, and I'll check my dates, but I think I'm not going to make VAI.
Yeah, it's now Verticon. It was rebranded. Well, next year maybe. Regardless, great to see you. And again, to our listeners, thanks for listening.
Hey, have a nice day.
See you, Dylan.
Thanks.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Verticon. Experience the ultimate thrill at Verticon, the show that features more helicopters than any. Cutting edge technology, hundreds of companies, and international industry leaders come to the world's largest vertical aviation show. Register today at verticon.org. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.